We are going to welcome Matt Marlinski, our first ever guest. So Matt is the founder of the Manhattan Lab, which is the gorgeous podcast we're recording in here. And he's looking at me right now. So I'm super excited to have him in the chair in like 1 second and interview him. And we're going to learn more about his journey, what it took to get here, as well as how he's experienced difficulties in his life, which has led him to becoming the person that he is today. Matt.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm so excited to have you here. Our first guest.
Hell yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't stop smiling.
You can't get any better from here.
I know. We've reached the peak already.
Cut.
So my first question to you is, what do you define as success versus failure? What are your personal definitions of that?
Success is, to me, you're sort of living on your own terms, right? So you have to define life whether you define life however you deem necessary. So some people deem it as like, I want to raise a family with kids. Other people deem it as like, I want to be a Grammy-winning artist, or I want to win an Oscar, or I want to build a 9-figure business that sells. So success is really self-defined. So unfortunately, in like our society, people tend to think like, well, if I don't have this, I'm a failure. And I'm one of those people because I'm a very ambitious person. But for a lot of people, like, success is so great. Like some of the best people we know in our life are like the mothers that raised us, the grandmothers and grandfathers that raised us, that like we're just kind of simple people that worked blue-collar jobs. They went to work for 50 years and then raised a great family. Mm-hmm. A lot of ways to do it. Failure comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but you had a goal and you didn't achieve it. And maybe that wasn't the right goal for you. Maybe it was a goal that maybe you were off. Maybe your compass was off. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, with the information given, you were perceived that this was like my thing, and you failed. And so failure can be a goal that wasn't achieved. You didn't live up to your best self. We fail, like there's micro failures all the time, right? Like you didn't call back the friend or something like that. And then there's the big one of like, I lost the job, I got fired, my company went under. So there's like all these failures that go on, and it's like your intentions didn't match the results, right?
Can you give me a time that you said you just mentioned that sometimes failures weren't really failures. Can you give me a time that you had a failure that really was a failure versus a failure that you were like, actually this had to happen? Or do you view all your failures like that?
Yeah, they all have to go under the sort of umbrella of they're all happening for a reason, because that's just how life goes. At the moment, they all suck. They're just all terrible. None of them wanted to happen. I didn't want it to happen. I wanted to do it as I please, but they all inform you because, like, you know, I have my spirituality in the way where like people are meant to be in your life and the universe has its way. It's no different than us meeting and all this stuff, and the universe is guiding you, and people are supposed to come into your life in the way you're supposed to come in. So we all had a vision. I've had a few. I wanted to be in a famous rock band. I thought I was going to build a massive videography business. I had a job last year where I was working with a big creator and I got fired from it. And so we can dive into all those, but they were all pretty big failures. I've had personals where I wasn't the best friend for people. I've had personal on the relationship side, and you know, at the moment I'm 36, and it's like they're tough, and they make you who you are. I mean, like they shape you from being sort of like the wide-eyed, sort of naive 19, 20-year-old going to the world versus like you start to see the scars form and like, oh, this happened and this, but it gets you to react differently. It gets you to sort of like, even when it's really bad, you can sort of find ways to get past it. You realize that life's long, and maybe things are about to happen to you. So like in the past 2 years, I've had a lot of failures, and now I sit here and it all happened for a reason, right? But you don't know at the time. When it happens, you go, everything's over. The fuck? It could have been the job, could have been the relationship. You're like, this is over. I've fucked my whole world. But it goes on.
But if you could go back to those failures, are there any that you would have prevented from happening, or would you have just let it all happen?
It's hard because like this goes into a conversation about free will. Like, so a lot of people say, you have free will, it's me you don't.
Let's get into it.
I love it. I tend to think you do. But there's some interesting data that says you don't. But like I tend to do, and like I tend to I'm a very much like hard work, like focus, you can get it done kind of thing. And so like I take, for instance, like I wanted to be like a famous musician and like it didn't happen. And like so there's days where I go, well, it wasn't for me, and I'm doing something I'm a lot more served for in the universe. So other times where I go, you didn't work hard enough. You idiot. Like you could have done this. Like you could have done this. If you weren't in your fucking head, if you weren't like nervous about this, or like you weren't with the wrong people, like hanging out with the wrong people in your 20s, like we all do. So it kind of depends on like, what day of the week it is, where the sun is shining, kind of this Mercury in retrograde, I don't know, but so it's kind of like whatever is going on in the universe. But I mean, I always go back and forth, like, did I not work hard enough, or was it not meant for me?
Are you really hard on yourself?
Yes, I'm the most hard on myself. I say to people, the number one quote that I hear from my mom all the time is like, Matt, you're too hard on yourself. And other people close to me as well.
But I argue that being hard on yourself, I think there is a significant downside, because I think you don't appreciate your own success.
Yes.
But also you won't have that success unless you are hard on yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I it's funny because like, again, like depending on when you catch me, I'm either like, yeah, I'm fucking rocking it, or I'm like the fucking biggest failure in the world. Like it depends when you catch me.
On the day.
Yeah,
on the day
I don't know.
time.
But sometimes I'm like, this is all you got, really? And then other days I'm like, fuck you, asshole. Like you're doing great. And it's all relative, right? We're all in our own head. And then that's when it's helpful to like sort of like seek out other people in your life, or like, you see, maybe you go on Instagram and you see like what your other friends or past acquaintances are doing, because a lot of Instagram, the older you get, is like a graveyard of like friendships. It's like all these old like friendships and work facility. Like, why do I even know what you're doing still? Like, you had a kid. I wrote congratulations. I haven't seen you in 10 years. What the fuck? Like, it's
Yeah.
So like a lot of Instagram's like weird like that. So you sort of see. I actually had a conversation with someone this morning. I used to work in the TV business. I went to broadcasting school, and I worked in TV when I got out of school. And I was just talking to a friend today, and she's like, "Man, the industry's so hard right now, and like I keep hearing about people that are like having trouble in the industry." And I was just like, yeah, I got out of that industry, but also just like, man, it's just like a past life. At that point, it's almost like a decade ago. You're just like, past life. Yeah. So.
And when you were trying to be in that industry, what made you realize that this was not something you wanted to do anymore?
You sort of see the crystal ball. And when I say that, it's like you get into an industry like broadcast TV, and that's, not to age myself, that's like early 2010s. I was in that industry. And then you sort of see how people are living ahead of you. So like we all get that when you're early 20s and you go into an industry, you see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And you sort of like watch their demeanor and how they're sort of taking on life. And these guys were just miserable. They just hated their jobs, hated their wives, hated everything. And of course you can argue like you were the master of your happiness. So like perhaps they weren't that good at that. But I could also argue like they just worked for a really shit industry that took shit care of them, didn't pay them enough, that threw them out when they weren't ready, done with them. And then you sort of see like, hey, I see where this like technology is going, this automation is going. Like I worked in crew on the crew side. So if you ever watch like live television, like I don't know, CNN, for instance, like there's people on camera and there's all the behind the scenes people. There's camera operators, audio operators, the people in the control room, the director, the technical director who like hits the button and all that stuff. So I was in crew positions. So like you just saw like they were starting to like shrink the jobs. So like instead of having 4 camera operators, there was like 1 person doing robotic cameras. You're like, oh, so they started to build like smaller control rooms where you could do like audio and like switch at the same time, kind of like my studio here where it's like all kind of integrated to one. And it's like, oh, this is not going in the right direction. It's time to go. But it's also just like you're not getting paid enough. It's shitty hours. I remember I worked for CNBC Squawk Box one time, and crew time was 4:30 in the morning. So I'm staying for the subway at like 3 in the morning on Myrtle Ave, Broadway and Bushwick, for those in the know. I don't know how I made it, but I did. So it's all those things. You want to be in control of your life. You want to be controlling your destiny. You just see where things are going. And I'm sure you've made pivots in your life too. You go, oh, this is not good. Like
sometimes the pivots weren't by choice,
yes.
But then hindsight, I was like, no, that was a good call.
It was.
So going back to what we were talking about in regarding to the times that you've failed, what was a moment recently where you were like, it doesn't even have to be recently, actually. Mm-hmm. What was a moment where you were like, all right, this has to be rock bottom. Like it can't get any worse than this. I've failed the maximum I could fail. Yeah,
it was last year. And it is for a few reasons. So right now we both work with someone called Anthony Pompliano. This is his office that we're in. I worked for him for 2020 into end of 22. We moved to Miami. We did a live show. Like I built a studio for him, like did a whole thing. I left at the end of that year because I was kind of plateauing. I was kind of doing like the same thing. I was kind of like going with the motions. So I was like, let me move on. I was actually going to start my company earlier. Then I kind of got scared and got offered a job with another creator. This creator wanted me to like, who I met in the past, wanted me to do short form content. I was hired in January of 2023, and by March I was fired, like full on fired. Like not even like a severance, like, hey, like your contract's done, you're out. And so like when I tell the story, sometimes it feels a little soft in a way, like, yeah, you got fired, who cares? Like I've had a job since I was 14. I was never fired. I've always left the job on good terms.
That's actually very impressive.
I know. I've never been fired. I've always taken a lot of pride in my jobs.
That's a big flex.
It is. But but again, like that goes to your failure thing. Like I wasn't as prepped for that. I've always cared about my reputation with work, always. And so like when I was not working there anymore, I was like, oh shit, like I'm my little avatar of what I think I am is not that. And there's people who like actually fucking hate me and dislike me, and you're like, oh, that's not good. And then like this person's a really big creator. It's like you're like in the industry, the world shrinks to the people who are in that world. So you go, oh, I'm like damaged goods right now. And I felt it. Like I felt it for like first 6 months. Like I felt it. Like people didn't talk to me the same anymore. Like I know they knew.
Oh, so people treated you differently.
I can think of 5 people at the top of my head who like weren't interacting with me the same after that happened. Because I knew they knew. Because I knew they were connected.
But in a way of being sympathetic towards you, or being like, ugh.
The second one.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah. So, but when I tell the story, it's not so much like when I tell it sounds like I got fired. Who cares? It was more like the amalgam of it all. So when I say like I've always, the audience doesn't know my story as well, but I've always been in the creative space since I was a kid. Like I was doing two things, either video production or music. I went to school for broadcasting, but I also played in bands most of my life. And like my dream originally was being a famous band or like famous musician. And like kind of hit my 30s and go, oh, it didn't happen. Right. And you could be the guy who's like, you could be like the rock star and they're into their 30s. Like, don't give up the dream. You're just like, let it go, bro.
Yeah. Like, what age do you let it go?
I think 30, but well, it depends what you want to do. There's a lot, you could make a big living in music. You could be like a teacher, you could work on Broadway, but in terms of being like in a contemporary, like band, like a famous, like you're probably.
I mean, you could also do like maybe side hustle band. You know what I mean?
You can, but it's also like there's you could think of like Chris Stapleton actually made it when he was in his mid 30s. But like country has that thing where like the older you are, the sort of like every industry is different. Like if you're doing country, you sort of like get the beard and you're sort of haggard and like you have like a great voice to it. Yeah. 10 years of smoking cigarettes every day, like you have a good voice. Yeah. And so like I did that. I worked in TV. That was another dream of mine. It didn't work. I like left that industry. I did a videography business, didn't work. I worked with like this like big creator in Pomp that I left, and I was like, did I maybe left too early? Did I blow it up? And so like some people get to like I'm at the time I'm 35. Some people get to that age in their life, that 35, 40, 45, and they go, I never even tried. Right? That's a big regret. People go like, I never even fuck. I have. Like I've gone for it. And I've always wanted like this like massive success, and like it hasn't happened. And that's like a really interesting thing to like experience, like the sort of like back end of the people who like it didn't happen, right? All these things you thought were gonna happen didn't happen, and like life's still fine. I have great family, great friends, great base, but like haven't gotten the relatives outwardly success in my career I was gonna have. Didn't have the money, and I'm like I got fired from like a social media job at 35. I was like, I don't have a family. Like I want to have raise kids, and you're like, uh-oh. Like, and so like it all sort of came into like it became that sort of like dark journey of like, what am I doing with my life kind of thing. And like that gets deep, and like I've always thought like I had to figure it out, but like maybe I'm not that smart. And
what were the thoughts that you had that were going through your mind at the time?
Well, some of them are really dark. I can get dark at times, but it was just like I just felt like a loser. You feel very less than. I can only speak for being a guy, but most men, we want to be like the breadwinner. We want to be like the head of the household, the head of the family, the head of your friend group. Like I liked making money. I like being around people and like having them, treat people to dinner, or like I like having money to like help out, and if there's problems, you can help the family. And like there's a reason why like there's a lot of things you can study. Like when men lose it all, they like jump out the window. Like they lose it all in the stock market. They literally kill themselves because like it's a thing for me. It's very primal. So when we lose like our work and identity, it's like people go, poor guys, whatever. Sure, but it's like it's hard for us. Like we have a lot of our identity. Not all guys, but most of us do.
And why do you think that is?
A lot of it goes very primal, right? Like just like head of the tribe, head of the fam. Like so many things are just ingrained with us for, millennia, right? Of just how we exist as humans, right? But in typical tribe days, men are just like the ones that go and hunt and come back and do the thing. So we feel like we need to be strong and like, and it's a real thing. Like, I don't want to like turn this into a blanket like manosphere kind of conversation, but like most women like that too. Like they want like the guy to like, hey, like you're competent, you could take care of the household. If there's a problem, you could fix it. Like women want that too. And sometimes we're not honest with ourselves. Like it's okay to want that, right? Yeah. And it's okay you want strong men. Today we're recording this on 9/11. Firefighters ran into burning buildings and died. Buildings collapsed on them. At the time, they didn't know it was going to collapse, but like hundreds of people ran up there to save people. You want that. You want, Scott Galloway jokes like you want that big dick energy. Like you want that shit at that time, right? Like you want people to like go and help people, and you need firefighters and policemen and people who do join the military. Like that's an extreme example. I'm a mere creative person who presses record on the video camera, but but you want it's a pride thing. It's a way for men to sort of have their life compass sort of like I'm doing the right thing. I'm helping people. I can help. I can lead the tribe. I have resources, whether through personal connections or monetary connections, where you can sort of be of service to people.
So how did you? Well, first of all, I agree. I think there is a lot of pressure on society with men. I mean, even you look at the suicide rates in men have spiked substantially, especially amongst Black men.
Yeah.
But so going back to your story after that moment, what did it take for you to get out of that? Was it getting a new job? And then how mentally did you get out of it?
The first thing is time, right? Like you have to, some people can just sort of like plow ahead. And I've done that in my career. That was the time I needed to stop. And for the first time in like probably most of my adult life, I didn't work for like 3 or 4 months. I just sat. And at the back end, it probably led to worse things, but time really does heal most things. It's very trite, but it is like time has to go on, and you have to like remove yourself from it. You gain wisdom from it. You see how life goes on, and like every day, like the sun's rising, people are going to work, people are doing their things. So like you do have to give it like that sort of like time to just sort of like, okay, this happened. That was a point where I need to stop and reevaluate. If I was like 28, I probably was like, okay, next job. That was the point where I was like, hey, listen, like I'm closer to 40 than I am to like my 30s, like, and so it's like, what's the next chapter going to look like? And you sort of assess like, here I am at this point in my life, at this part of the society, where do I have the most value to give from a work perspective, but also a monetary perspective? And so that's how I started to sort of like reformulate how I wanted to do. And for me, that's like in the podcast, social media, not so much, like podcast, like production world of video. And so I sort of like, okay, you sort of like let the time do its thing. I did a lot of like soul searching, did a lot of like meditative work.
Is there anything you learned about yourself during that time that you don't think you would have learned if that firing did not happen?
Yeah, that's going to be okay. Like, give it, like, it's okay. Like, we always spotlight our life and we think everyone cares and everyone thinks we're stupid and everything. And, like, no one really cares. And, like, really, like, yeah, you can rebuild. And, those are one of those moments where, like, you don't burn bridges a lot of life because there are people who still support you and you just got to find your people, right? Like, when I was younger, I remember when, like, I was, like, trying to play music, you would try to play with, like, you would go to all these shows and all these, like, events. So, like, you can meet, like, 100 people and, like, play with some of them. The older you get, like, that number shrinks. It shrinks in a lot of ways. Like, you get one partner you fall in love with, you get a small group of friends, like your one family, everything shrinks. And so, like, now I build a business of, like, 5 people that fuck with me, right? I don't need, like, you don't need 100 people, like, oh my God, I want to work with you. It's like, who are the 5 people that fuck with me, like my creative work, pay me a lot of money, and, like, recognize how good I am, right? And so, like, you really have to find, like, your tribe and everything. So it's not so much a popularity contest. It's like, who are the people that really are in your corner? And that takes some time to find. And, assuming you weren't a piece of shit, you didn't burn your bridges, which I assume you and me are both, and people listening to this podcast aren't pieces of shit. There are people to support you, and you just have to you got to go through the woods a little bit. So like, I do appreciate the journey. I do appreciate going to the depths of it. I appreciate that it was like it was a way for me to recalibrate the next chapter of my life, of trying to have honest conversations with myself. Like, what am I not good at, right? Like, we think we're good at a lot of things, and sometimes we suck. Sometimes you suck at things, like, and it's good. So you get that learning experience. You get you get to learn, but also like lean into what you're really good at. And it's all those amalgam of things, but it's like that day to day is sort of like, okay, you sort of get that spirit back a little bit. You lose the job, you lose the relationship, and it sucks and it's horrible. And it's just like, hey, today's a little better, right? Sun's shining, everything's still happening. And it helps when you talk to people in your life too, because like, I always make the example of like my sisters with kids, and like, yeah, I can bitch at myself, and they're like, listen, man, like the kids gotta go to work at 6 and the kids gotta go to school at 6 a.m. Like we have soccer practice and like horse riding, and like they have this club they gotta do, and like we didn't get home till like 9 p.m. Like I don't have time for this. That's sometimes good though, because like it just gets you out of your track of like, all right, motherfucker, like it's okay. Like people have to do their thing and go to work, and that actually always helps me. And like, because they, especially mothers, they're forced to like, I've grown up with my mom and 2 sisters. I grew up with women, so it's like it's nice when like, especially like strong women are just like getting after it. You're like, all right, Matt.
And what was their advice about the situation when you were going through it?
Well, I think they always, good family is always good for listening. A lot of people don't have advice. Like it's hard for them to give me advice because like they're not living the life I live. Even my mom, like they're great, but like they haven't lived my life, and I haven't lived there. So it's hard to give like tangible advice. Mm-hmm. But they were good at like when I would sort of like have phone calls to them and sort of like go off the rails a little bit. They're good at get you back on, and like, hey, maybe you should go talk to somebody, or hey, like maybe you should consider like these things. So like, they're good at that. And I think they just gave me the time and space. So it wasn't so like much tangible action advice, because I know myself and trust myself. But it's nice for people just like, hey, we love you for who you are. Take the time. Be there to listen, as I would for anyone else. Like if anyone else I know is going to a problem, sometimes like the best advice is sit on the phone. I think Simon Sinek talked about that, where he's like, listen, just sit in the mud with me. He talked about it on the podcast recently. I think he did a Diary CEO. He's just like, I don't need your advice. Sometimes when we have calls with friends, we sit down, like if your friend's in the bad position and you're okay, our sort of like first instinct is to help them. Well, let me help you. Here's my tool bag of advice I can give you. What people mostly need is like just someone to talk to and listen. So actually like the real goal is sort of just kind of sit back and just like sit in the mud with me. And even if they're being ridiculous, even if they're saying like crazy things, just let them get out. Let all that dirty water get out. So if it's like a well, you get the dirty water out to get to the clean water, right? So like get it out. So a lot of it's just sitting in the mud, and you just need people to sort of sit with you a little bit. And then like, you don't need tangible advice. I mean, like they sort of let you know when you're wilding a little bit too much, when you're sort of off the rails, like, hey, listen, you're too hard on yourself. Like you're doing that. Like, so that's good. But that's mostly what I think about.
And so in hindsight, and looking back on the moments and just the moments of failure in your life, what do you wish you would have told yourself at the time? And not specifically with you getting fired, but in regards to all of the other failures as well.
It's just going to be okay. Like, trust yourself more, love yourself more, invest in yourself more. Stop being so hard on yourself. Have confidence in yourself more. Like if I have any advice to the younger self, it's just like pour more of me into me. Give myself more confidence. Give myself more love. Give myself more sort of clearance for mistakes and forgiveness, and like it's just like more of the good stuff. We're so hard on ourselves, and it's like I've been the worst on myself. The worst. And if we were doing like a philosophical conversation, probably deals with losing a parent at a young age and all that stuff, but it's like, man, like I just wish I could like shake younger Matt like more. Just love yourself more. Like you're good. Like you're so good at what you do. Like stop letting people beat you down. Stop letting society tell you what to do. It's just like just pour more of yourself into yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think at times we can seriously be our own worst enemy.
Ooh.
Like we are our biggest roadblock.
Ooh, if someone can kneecap Marlinski, it's Matt Marlinski. He's standing there with a crowbar, just waiting to fucking get you.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you thought you were over it? Yeah. Yeah. So it's just and so like if I could do anything for like, that's something I definitely want to do, whether I raise kids or like the next generation, I have nieces and nephews and like whoever else comes in my life. I just want to like pour that into them. Like just like fucking love yourself. Not delusional. Some people love themselves too much.
Yeah.
Some of them run for president. Like you love yourself too much. Like it's like, so, but sometimes it's like, hey, just, it's okay. Like, you know, give your, you know, just go all at it. Like, especially those 20s, we look back and you're just like, man, just go harder. Just go at it, man. Like that's your time.
Yeah. I feel like I'm, as being someone in their 20s right now, it's every year I feel like I look back and I reflect and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? Why am I so hard on myself?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the era of being really hard on myself. So what you're saying resonates.
The 20s, I think I've said to you off camera, 20s are a tornado. Everyone's just it
really is.
It's a bunch of tornadoes. Everyone's
shitstorm, tornado, soup, vegetable salad of like hormones and emotions. And the way I explain it is just like a hormone casserole. You're just thinking so much.
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh. You're insecure. You don't know what you want to do. You're not sure about yourself.
Yeah.
When did you get out of that?
30.
Oh, shit. I got 5 years to go.
No, it starts because like at the end of your 20s, again, like I was trying to do things that are young people's game, like music, and you like turn 27, 20, you go, uh-oh. And I remember I have a vocal teacher in New Jersey. He's like actually, I consider one of my best friends and my mentor. His name's Tim. He's about 10 years older than me. And like I would take vocal lessons with him. I'm like, oh my God, I'm right on time. He's like, Matt, just like wait till you're 35. And like I hit 35, I was like, God damn, he was right. Some people give you like Inception advice. Like it's always Inception where they tell you something, you go, fuck off. And then like 5 to 7 to 10 years goes by, you go, damn it. 30s are nice because like when I turned 30, I hit sort of like a release of like, like almost like you don't have to worry about like, you're not like the young guy anymore. You don't have to worry about like fitting in. Like you don't have to worry about like hanging with certain people to be cool. You're just like art you are. It sort of revisits itself like last year I lost my job, but like you realize you're closer to 40 than you are to 30. You go, uh-oh. like there's a few like uh-oh moments. Go, oh shit. But I think for the most part, like, yeah, you have to sort of like get out of that thing. But everyone's, I don't want to be like sort of like, I don't want to get basic answers because like everyone's different, man. Like some people like have, get their shit together earlier. Some people realize these things earlier. So like, I don't know. So it's hard to say exactly when it is. But for me, I was a bit of a Peter Pan in my 20s. You know, I was a lot of that tornado. Guysy.
Casserole.
Guys. Yeah, I was a big hormonal casserole. Yeah, I don't love some of the version of myself. That's a great term. I'm going to steal that one. But yeah, it was that. And so like, I was a bit of a Peter Pan. I didn't have good like male influencers around me, so like our influences, so I had to kind of learn on my own.
Okay. And so before we go, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to people who are just starting out their careers, actually no, I changed my mind. Okay. People throughout their life, because I think you can be figuring it out at any time, in any space. I think there's a lot of pressure for us to have it figured out by the time that we're 30. Like I feel like by the age of when you first graduate college, it's like, okay, well now you're sent into the real world with no financial education on like how to buy a house, how to at least like, we can dive into the U.S. education system
that's
later.
Another episode, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we're not really set up for success and there's a lot of societal pressure to have it figured out. So what's your advice to people who are trying to figure it out, who have failed, or even those who haven't?
The first one I have is sort of like define your expectations of life. And I alluded to it earlier, but when you ask about success, it's all relative, right? So like if your relative success is like to build a big 9-figure business, what does that take to do? If your goal is to raise a family, you get a wife or vice versa, and you have 3 kids and you live in the New Jersey suburbs and you put them through school and, you know, one person's a nurse, the other person is a police officer, and like you hang out with your friends in the weekend and you join the softball team and you take trips, and that's pretty fucking successful. There's some days I'm kind of jealous of it, actually. I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. I want to learn that. So like, it's really like the first thing is define what your life looks like, right? It's all made up. This is all made up. So like define what's your goal in life, and like it's okay, like, you know. So your career goals, your money goals, your family goals, like really lay them out. The second one goes back to what we talked about, like truly just like kind of love yourself. Like it's okay. Like give yourself grace, love yourself. It's okay. We're all going to be dust at some point in this world. So just like, remember that time goes and it goes fast. Like, I can't believe I'm close to my 40s. Jesus Christ. Like it's like, it happens quick. So it's just like that. The third one I have is just like, keep your loved ones close. The older you get, the smaller your circle gets. If you're lucky enough to have a good family like I am, cherish it. Spend the time with for me, my mother. And if you have a father too, like my mother and my sisters with kids. I was living in Miami for a few years, but back simply one of the reasons was that, like, so I can always go do family stuff and like keep your friends close, like the ones that like are your real friends, and you know who they are. Like sometimes they're people from high school, people from college, but like I lost my closest friend about 2-3 years ago to like brain cancer. 31-year-old girl died. You're just like, fuck, and like I didn't really talk to her a lot before she passed away, and like it eats at me all the time. That's a personal failure, and so like now what we do is like. Her name is Allie, but like my other friends that I grew up with, like in the same area, like I have 2 friends, Lisa and Kristen. We make sure we meet up like once a quarter, and like we go out to dinner and we talk and like have a good time, and like we make sure like we keep in touch. And like the older you get, like it's harder to make plans. Like it becomes cliche where like you have to like put in the calendar to hang out. Like it gets kind of sad and bleak. But like, hey, listen, like let's hang out. Like, okay, we're all free the first week of October on Thursday, whatever the date is. Like 7:00, let's do it. Cool. And then sometimes like people go, shit, I gotta reschedule, but like stay on it. Like, okay, what's everyone next week looking like? Like someone's got to take the lead. So even if like there was one time we had to reschedule like 4 times, but like you just like get it on the calendar. So yeah, so all those things, define your expectations, define your life, what your life wants to look like, love yourself more, and then really keep your loved ones closer because it goes quick. I've been to a lot of funerals, and I was at a funeral a month ago for my brother-in-law's mom. I've been to a lot of funerals and wakes the last like couple of years, and it gets bleak because like then you start at that point where like I only see like old high school friends like at a wake. You're like, because like that person's mother died or their father died, or like I had another friend who died at the end of last year, and you go like, Jesus Christ, like it gets bleak. So like keep people around you. So love's a cool thing. Keep your loved ones around. That's what I got.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was really amazing to have you. And where can people reach you or contact you or rent the studio? Oh,
the studio. All my socials are Matt Marlinski. I'm not famous, but you can follow me. Yeah, those are all my socials. And themanhattanlab.com. Come rent some studio space. We'd love to have you. Claire's obviously could be part of it. We're happy to have Claire. And thank you for having me. I appreciate you listening. Appreciate you offering me to speak and meander for half hour to 40 minutes. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think your story is so interesting, and I think you're someone that hasn't taken the traditional route. No. And I really respect that. I do respect people who take the traditional route, but to really go against the grain and like start your own thing, to get fired at 35 and bounce back from that, like kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. This is like.
We love having you around here.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's we love having you, or love having you around, and love everyone else here. It's great. So, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, of course.